Waters.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
O'Kane.
Here.
Shaner. Here. Scott.
Here, I just remind people today is 9/11, day that we should always remember the families that were lost and the lives that were changed, and I would recommend we remember them in our silent prayer today. We'll go to interviews for wastewater treatment plant. Chris Baltius, I can't ever say that name, sorry, Chris. Yeah. Tell us why you want to serve on this committee. And
I guess being an industry, Chris Baltusius, Barlow Trucking Company, South Sioux City. We own and operate a 50 truck company in South Sioux and a tank wash facility. I guess I want to be on that board to make sure we're not wasting a bunch of money on stuff we don't need to. With operating a trucking company in South Sioux, I watch day-to-day dollar expenditures, projects, and everything else. So I just want to make sure we're not buying stuff we don't need.
does Bardo ship to the, are they shipping to the new sewer plant or are they shipping to our plant? Do you know? Not that it matters, I'm just asking.
We haul wastewater, we were hauling wastewater to your facility down on 75.
Oh, you were hauling out of there?
We were hauling into there.
Into there, okay.
Yeah, we hauled a bunch of water from Mid-America Energy into there, probably like, I don't know how many pounds it was. We hauled quite a few.
Okay.
When they closed down their lagoon, and plus we haul our own wastewater to you guys until our fats, oils, and greases content was too high, and now we have to take it south.
You have to take it where?
South.
Okay. Okay. Questions?
Appreciate it, Chris.
Thank you. Appreciate
Good
it.
day, guys.
Thank you. Isaac Harms is rescheduled. Kelly Jorgensen.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you want to serve.
I'm the Director of Environmental Compliance for Ag Processing, Inc., or AGP, as it's more commonly known. In the Omaha office, we've got a number of facilities in Iowa and the surrounding states. Our AGP Sergeant Bluff facility discharges currently to the city, has for a number of years. So we just have a vested interest in what takes place there, and just wanted to offer whatever services we can in the evaluation of the direction that the city goes.
And you're going to be okay whenever, they haven't established, I don't think, when the meetings are yet, right? But your schedule's flexible enough that you can.
As long as there's enough time in advance for scheduling that. From what I understand, they plan on meeting monthly, and so.
One of the items of the first meeting will be to set a time that works best for the members.
Yeah, you'll be part of that if you're on the committee, so
Okay.
you'll have a say in that. Questions?
No, I appreciated your experience and sharing your interest very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Desiree McCaslin.
Hello, everyone. Desiree McCaslin, Director of Operations for Biochem. We make heparin from your local slaughterhouses and ship it to Europe. I'm a licensed wastewater operator. This community has been plagued with wastewater treatment issues for decades. I don't think that's anything new. I care about the environment and the sustainability of this community, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Questions?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks for applying.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor and Council will have more interviews, I believe, next week, and then following that, we'll have a motion to appoint members, and so we can get started.
Okay. We'll go to the consent agenda, items 3 through 13F. Consider them to pass unanimously unless a separate roll call vote's asked for by a council member. you want to speak on an item, please come up as I read it. State your name and address for the record. If you want to speak on an item not on the agenda, please come up under citizen concerns. And again, state your name and address, and remember, you'll be limited to 3 minutes per item. I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
3 is a reading of the August 28th City Council minutes. 4 is a motion appointing Terrence Feenstra to the Library Board of Trustees. 5 is a motion acknowledging August 22nd Board of Adjustment actions. 6 is a resolution designating depositories for public funds. 7 is a resolution approving an amendment number 1 to the employment manual for PATS employees to revise language related to vacation accrual. I want to go back to 6. How do we designate we can put this much money in every bank? Obviously, we don't have that kind of money. I wish we did, but anyway. How do you determine who gets the money? Because that's been a complaint I've heard from bankers over the years, is they're allowed to take up to 10 million, but they don't get any money. So how do you guys determine that?
Kelly Hill, City Treasurer. We try to keep money in every bank that has a location in Sioux City, and then we send out bids for items that we have available, for funds we have available, and then we take the best bid at that time. So we make sure that there's enough, and then any excess funds get the best bid available.
How often do you take out that bid then?
It depends on the availability
Sure,
of funds at
sure.
that time.
On average, do you know?
Once
Yeah.
a month, we have stuff that's available, but we're going to go out for bank CDs and then treasuries as well.
Sure. Thank you.
7 is a resolution approving amendment number 1 to the employment manual for PATS employees to revise language relating to vacation accrual. 8 are resolutions authorizing payment to Winkler Roofing for the airport roof replacement project. 9 are actions relating to street closures. A is a resolution temporary closing a section of Floyd Boulevard and Jefferson Street on October 12th for the North High School Homecoming Parade. B is a resolution temporary closing a section of Grandview Boulevard and 13th Street on October 6th for the Bishop Heelan High School Homecoming Parade. 10 are actions relating to agreements and contracts. A is a resolution approving a joint use agreement for ag trading Union Pacific Railroad at the Southbridge Rail Yard. B is a resolution approving a First Amendment to the Administrative Services Agreement for nationwide retirement, decreasing the annualized compensation requirement. C is a resolution approving a consulting services agreement with Confluence for Lions Park Improvement Project. Jill, I did not, are you here?
She's here.
I did not get to read your memo that you sent back, I'm sorry, but is this like 20% include all the supervision? We're not going to have a deal come back and say, now we need another 10 for the construction oversight.
Right, Jill
Because the
Waterside,
engineering
Neighborhood Services
department
Manager.
does that more than once around here.
So this includes everything in addition to the construction administration, inspection, design. Also, some of our federal requirements are Section 3 administration, as well as the Davis-Bacon requirements too they'll be doing.
Mayor, I have a couple of questions for Jill while she's up here. You've had a public meeting or two with the neighborhood to get what their priority for improvements would be. Could you just kind of outline that for us,
Sure.
please? This is an exciting project.
Yes, and
Really
it's
is.
kind of taken a little bit longer than what's typical for us. So
Sure.
we had a public meeting in the park clear back in August 2022 and kind of gathered what was important to the neighborhood at that time. Things like a shelter, new play equipment, new surfacing for the existing play equipment, trail with sidewalk, small dog park, drinking fountain, all sorts of little things too. And so once we got the estimated cost back of over $1 million, we kind of took a step back and waited to see. We still had some COVID funds, but they had a tighter timeline to be spent. And so we were waiting to see if HUD would extend that, which they did, because we don't like to, if we can avoid it, we don't like to phase projects. So once they extended that, then we could do everything all at once, which is much preferred by us in the neighborhood. So that's why there was a little delay there.
What's your estimated completion date then for the project?
We're hoping by the end of next summer.
Great. Oh, it's an exciting project. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
D is a resolution approving a consulting services agreement with DGR Engineering for the Isabella Square Infrastructure Improvement Project. F is okay, and Gordon, that's all in too, right? Or that's yours, Jill? That's all in too? Construction supervision, everything?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
That was
Thank
on
you.
10E.
10E. Yeah, Jill, that's another exciting project I wanted you to talk about the utilities and what we're doing to make this happen. It's just a really good project for the city.
Yes, we're very excited too. It's a combination of a lot of different federal funding sources, so there are no local funds in this project. So the utilities are going to be utilizing the ARA funds that the city received. We'll be utilizing home funds to construct the homes and CDBG to build the park. So 11 affordable homes, we're very excited about it. So this is the first step in making that happen.
No
Terrific.
doubt.
Yeah, thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
I got to go back to D, resolution approving agreement for maintenance of stormwater detention system with Mid-America and accepting a permanent easement. I should have asked this question. Why, if this is a detention pond for only Mid-America and they're responsible for all the maintenance, why do we need anything?
Gordon Fair, city engineer. This is just to ensure that if they don't provide this maintenance, we can get on site to maintain it and then bill them for it.
So it's only if they neglect to do so?
That's correct.
Do we have that on every other one of these?
That's what we're working on. You'll see more and more of these.
I'm asking, do we have that on all the other ones?
No,
Obviously,
not
we
all
don't.
the other ones, but we're working on it.
Okay.
Thanks.
F is a resolution approving a renewal option number 1 to the amended lease agreement with Missouri River Boat Club for 1085 Council Oaks Drive. G is the BNSF Railroad. 1 is a resolution rescinding Resolution 2023-0693 authorizing agreements with BNF Railway for the Court Street Sidewalk Reconstruction and Railroad Safety Project. 2 is resolution authorizing a sidewalk construction and maintenance agreement and easement agreement with the BNSF Railway for the Court Street Sidewalk Reconstruction. 11 is purchasing. A is a resolution awarding a purchase order to Riverside Technologies for the County Justice Center PC replacement. B is a resolution awarding a purchase order to Stu Hansen Dodge City Jeep for 1 Ford F-450 truck. C is a resolution awarding a purchase order to Cryotech de-icing technology for liquid chemical de-icer for the airport. 12 are applications for beer and liquor license. 13 are beer board, commission, and committee minutes. Anyone to be heard on any of those items? Passes 5-0. 14 is a hearing an ordinance rezoning 4016 Standard Stadium Drive. The petitioner's Dolph Ivner. P&Z recommends approval. I'll move it.
Second.
Public hearing's now open. Mr. Gleiser, do you have any good things for the good of the order that you want to tell us about? Come on up the mic if you would.
Andrew Gleiser, Planning and Zoning Chair. That one passed on a 4-0-1 vote. Seemed like a good use of an awkward space.
At least you got down to 2 you need to get to the meetings. You got 5 for this one. That was good. I'm glad to see that. Thank you. Anyone else be heard on this one? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. Is anybody opposed to waiving the statutory rule?
No.
I'll move that.
Second.
Moore.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Second, third.
Second.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
15 is a hearing and ordinance placing 7,800 Allison Avenue in zone classification general industrial. P and Z recommends approval. I'll move that.
Second.
Gleiser.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
5-0 vote.
Anyone to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. Anybody opposed to waiving statutory rule? I'll move it.
Second.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
I'll move second, third.
Second.
Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Shaner. Aye.
16 is a hearing and ordinance rezoning 7600 Allison Avenue. P and Z recommends approval. I'll move it.
Second.
Another 5-0
5-0.
vote.
Yeah. Anyone to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. Anybody opposed to waiving the statutory rule?
No.
Move that.
Second.
Waters.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye. I'll move second and third.
Second.
Moore.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
17 is a hearing and ordinance rezoning 5800 and 6108 Correctionville Road. P and Z recommends approval. I'll move that.
Second.
Hearing's now open.
Also a 5-0 vote.
Anyone to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. Anybody opposed to waiving the rules? I'll move that.
Second.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Move second and third.
Second.
Shaner. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
18 is a hearing and ordinance approving a development concept plan for 2319 and 2605 and a half 41st Street. The petitioner's Lieber Land Holdings, PNC recommends approval, deferred from August 28, 2023. I'll move first reading.
Second.
Public hearing is now open. I don't know who's going to go first. Go ahead.
Chris Madsen, planner. As you stated, this item is deferred from the August 28th meeting. During that time, we did hold a public meeting at North Middle on September 7th. We had approximately 40 or 50 people attend that meeting. We did send out the notice to an expanded notification list per council direction. We did receive some updated plans at that meeting, including a preliminary grading plan, which we can pull up. It's also been made available that the residents were able to see those. So generally, it seemed like the response was positive during that meeting with a couple of those questions answered. There's been some revisions made to the concept plan that was on that plan that was presented, including some more public green space, a public park on that. But with that, open up to any questions.
Chris, the one question I had is, this is a concept plan. Can you talk through the next steps if we were to approve just the overall concept plan, what the timeline and steps needed to take, or where this is along the process?
Sure. The concept plan is an optional step that the petitioner may take. In this case, just to get general consensus of what the council wants to see the use on the site. So obviously this one is a mix of different housing, residential housing types that are being proposed. It has been reduced to 131 lots on the site with the green space that's been added on that plan. With the approval of the concept plan, the petitioner would then have to move to the preliminary plat and rezoning of the property. So with that would come much more detailed engineering, grading, utility layout, street layout of that plan, as well as the rezoning that would allow the development to occur.
And with that preliminary plat, then that's when we still could make suggestions based upon what we're seeing at that step or recommendations?
Absolutely, yeah, but any step up until council approval, it can be changed. Obviously, you can make a motion approving with conditions at that moment as well. So, yep, after the public notice is sent out for the preliminary plat, the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, and then obviously the council hearing, changes could be made all throughout that process.
Chris, I don't have it in front of me right now, but the mayor had made a list of about 6 or 7 items regarding the development, and I think I've been told the developer accepted all of those. Do you know which memo I'm talking about?
I do. I don't have that list in front of me either. I know some of those had been met or would be met with the preliminary plan, including looping the utilities, the grading can't leave the site. Obviously, from a staff level and the comments have been made, we want to have that included on the preliminary plat. That it couldn't use right-of-way to leave the site. And there was a couple of comments more for staff, for engineering about no parking on 41st Street, a couple items like that as well. But correct, my understanding is the developer had agreed to meet those, that the ones that they would be in charge of meeting.
You'll see those get carried forward then?
Correct.
Thank you.
And at one point in the process, Chris, is the traffic study to be able to look at that and address those concerns?
Because that would actually take probably more time, it'd likely be after the preliminary plat, but that would be items that would have to be met on public infrastructure. So likely it would be what the city would have to look at improving, whether it's traffic signals, traffic signs, what items those would be. Petitioner may have more detail on when that would come, but likely it would be after that process.
After the plat?
After the preliminary, correct. Ideally before the finals start coming through.
Yeah.
Anyone to be heard? I'm going to have you go over here.
David Raymond, 2701 41st Street. Apparently, I'm in the minority at that neighborhood meeting because I'm against this. It all comes down to planning ahead, which has been a problem for Sioux City in the past. And if you're going to do the traffic study after the preliminary plat, it's too late. Approving this preliminary concept is opening the door where it's going to make it harder to close the farther you go. I'm just afraid that it's going to get to the point where you can't stop it. You're going to look and say, well, traffic's already a problem there. What difference does it make if we make it just a little bit worse? I had more to say, but that's about all I can say right now.
Thank you.
Chris, can you, Mayor, I want to ask Chris, can you address that for us, please? The comment that was just made.
I may have to defer to the petitioner and what their time frame would be. But again, the traffic study would show what public improvements need to be made to the existing infrastructure, which could be made at any time during or after the development is approved.
So if the traffic study shows some improvements that have to be made, that those would be done, those could be incorporated into the development plan?
Either into the development plan, into the CIP if necessary, if it's on public streets that are outside of the development, correct.
But I think what you just said was the development would move forward, the houses would be built, even if we had a deficiency in the traffic. It's just, it has to be, those would not?
No, you have to bring a traffic study.
If the traffic study finds that our roads are underbuilt and the city does not have the funds immediately to move forward with building a wider street, then this development would stop.
You could stop it, but the traffic study has to come before it goes back to planning and zoning.
Just the study, though, not addressing the deficiencies.
Well, it will address the deficiencies.
Because we'd be able to look at the study.
Then it's your job to say, well, the deficiencies are too great to make this viable or not. But
the traffic study doesn't know what to study until it has a preliminary, right?
well, we've never done a preliminary, but yeah, go ahead. I mean, this was kind of a first step.
Correct.
Anyone else?
Tina Hall, 4415 Buckwalter Drive. I have shared just some of the same concerns about it. You know, once it starts moving, it's on a roll. But it sounds as though you're considering that. Thank you for having the public hearing. There was a little bit of problem with a late notice. I don't know that it would have increased the participation at the meeting or not, but I, for example, got mine on the Tuesday before the Thursday that the meeting arrived. I mean, I did get it beforehand, but there wasn't a lot of time. And as it moves forward, I just want the City Council to consider the things they've talked about in their previous comprehensive plans about assurances of the quality development, taking into account the physical features and natural environment, that the development follows the standards that are sensitive, aesthetic, visual and functional qualities and topography of the vegetative problems of the Loess Hills. And I'm very keenly interested in having a buffer zone that's substantial enough to hold the soil back, and that I'd recommend it be planted in native grasses which have a deep root system to hold that soil. Also, with regard to the soil leaving the site, I hear that it's supposed to stay on the site, but also I've heard that the potential is that they're going to be moving about the same amount of soil that they had planned for in the original plan in 2019, and that some of it, if it doesn't fit on the site, will be moved off over to adjacent properties. So those are the kinds of details I'd like for the council to stay on top of, you know, so it's sort of, we're saying this, but this also might happen. And that causes me to have concern about it moving
Off
forward.
the site. It'll move to more land that the developer has bought, but that will not be trucked off. Dan, go ahead.
So in other words, it might be moved, for example, I own, but my property goes further down, and even if it's not next to my property, if it's off the site, but on some property they own, that's something we need to know as well, as opposed to having to ask the questions and finding out, you know, those are things I shouldn't have to dig for. They should be apparent. Anyway, so those are the concerns I have about once we start green lighting it, it gets harder and harder to hold in. And I'd like to be sure that the council keeps track of that and doesn't allow it to move forward unless that's met.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll offer a couple comments. I was there, the mayor, I saw you there as well. I did not think that there was an overwhelmingly positive reaction from people. There was one person who showed up early at the meeting and left after about 5 minutes, and they said, well, that was easy. And she'd let me know on the way in that she was all for the development. But other than that, I heard a lot of people sharing a lot of concerns. And so I want to make sure that those concerns don't just fall by the wayside. I had some concerns with the meeting itself in that there was no signage. And going to North Middle, you would expect to go to the front doors of the building, walk through the front doors of the building, maybe have a sign saying there's a public meeting there, and there wasn't that. So for the first about 15 or 20 minutes, I held the door open for people and ushered them into the side door so that people knew where to go. I was concerned that if I didn't, they would approach a locked door and then simply walk away, and I can't say for certain that people didn't do that after I went into the meeting. One of the biggest concerns, well, there were a few concerns that I shared with the developer and with city staff as well. I'm concerned about having that detention pond right next to the park. And I've heard plenty of people say, well, you know, it's only going to fill up with water if there's heavy rains. Well, if there's heavy rains and there's kids at a park that are small, that's concerning for me. So I feel like that needs to be addressed. I did like the fact that green space, that expands the green space a little bit. The other concern I have was how close the lots get to the school and the fact that there's no buffer. And I think that's the perfect room for some compromise. I know other municipalities that are along the Loess Hills have it in their ordinance that you have to have native plantings or you have to have so many feet from the edge of the property or from the Loess Hills. as a buffer, as a natural space. And I think this is a huge opportunity for that, and I haven't seen that addressed. But that's personally something that I'd like to see before I go forward with anything.
Anybody else?
I want to ask Chris, because I want to make sure I'm clear on this about the site plan where the project will be built. That's where the dirt and the grounds, the land has to stay there, correct? If they do any earth moving, it has to stay on that site.
Petitioner has an agreement with the neighboring property owner to have any excess fill on their site as well. So from that perspective, we don't want it trucked off
Pushing it to the east.
They're buying more land
to the north,
to go further east?
East.
north and east, correct.
North and east. But it'll be on their land then?
It would be on a neighboring farmer's land, correct,
Conjoined.
including their own.
Sold the lots where these guys are and then sold the next street up. So they're buying ground from Hanson.
So it's not leaving the site on any road necessarily.
Correct.
But it is a significant, I looked better this morning. I mean, Doug Rose is actually above this site today, and he doesn't care. He's for the project, I think, from the way he talked. But it looks like this is going to be higher than him, so they're going to move a lot of dirt to the east, northeast.
And we've only seen the final grading plan that was presented, or the preliminary plan that was presented during the meeting, but during the preliminary plat phase, we would have to see more of those details.
I don't disagree with one thing with Matthew. That park needs to be in the middle of the site. I know the developer doesn't want to put it there, but that park, if you're going to have kids up there, needs to be in the middle. It doesn't need to be on the fringe. And it doesn't need to be by a lake. I can disagree with, I can't disagree with you on that. I'm glad we got some lots for park. I think that's terribly important with this big a development, but I think when that plan comes back, that has to be considered.
Yeah, and I would just say I would commend the citizens that came today and came to the public meeting, as well as the developer and members of their staff I was able to attend. I was getting there from a meeting right before that, but was able to at least join the discussion and talk with a bunch of the residents in the area, as well as city staff, and work through some of those concerns. I share what the mayor and Matthew brought up, and I shared it with Jordan and them, that I thought, having a city park, or having a park in general, I thought it was a really great space. I mean, if you weren't at the meeting or didn't hear about the update, they did say the park would be significant, approximately 3 football fields in size. But that was my recommendation as well, was just to think about a proximity, of who lives in what lots, so that people in all the different neighborhoods or all the different areas of that development would be able to easily access it through sidewalks and not have to worry about being on the main street going in and out of the development. I thought that would, be a welcome addition. But yeah, I would just commend. I thought the citizens did a great job as far as talking through some of their concerns, and I think some of their concerns are very valid. I mean, I think you're working at an elevation and with soil that is highly susceptible to these types of things, and so I think the developer knows that, and knows that they're going to have to do significant work as far as testing before and after, and looking at what those slopes look like. They've committed to that, but as I spoke with some homeowners, I think that we need to not be looking at bare minimums, but hold them to a higher standard to make sure that this development goes as they're projecting, because undoubtedly sometimes, after you do the dirt work and then you hand it off to a developer, I think sometimes then those standards aren't met, and then those agreements aren't met. And I think that that's something that I know I, as a council member, don't want to see, and I don't want to stick any homeowner with. And so I want to make sure that we're holding people to that accountability. But otherwise, I appreciate the developer, and in addition to the citizens that were, I thought, voicing their concerns in a respectful manner, I also appreciate the developer and his staff for there, and city staff too. I know Gordon worked with some folks there quite a while. Just walking through the plans and discussing options and things that maybe could be changed or adjusted, and at least answering some of those questions. So I just appreciated it very much. I thought it was very civil for something that affects a great number of people, and probably one of the biggest concerns I have is traffic as well. I mean, I share that with all of you. I don't live in that neighborhood, but I understand the concern, and I think we need to make sure that we're looking at that, addressing that before we green light everything. But it seems that is going to happen, and we'll have to make those adjustments. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's exciting that we can have growth and development. I think we need that. That gets me excited because I think we're pretty foolish if we don't think that our neighboring communities are trying to find ways that they can grow and they can expand, and we need to do the best that we can to offer quality housing opportunities for people that want to come to our community. And so I'm looking forward to this, but I think that we do need to proceed with caution, and I appreciate everyone being at the table to do so.
I too want to thank the staff and the neighbors and the developer too, because 2 weeks ago we had a lot of questions but no answers. And so I appreciate that the effort was made to get answers to the citizens. The neighbors may not have liked all of the answers, but more answers were answered that evening than 2 weeks ago. So thank you all for doing that. And as the citizen said earlier, we just have to keep a watchful eye on as it develops and not get to a point where there's no turning back. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, we're not going to do second and third. It passes 4-1. Mr. O'Kane votes no. We will not do second and third tonight. 19's a hearing.
What that means is we have a meeting next week. And so if anyone wasn't able to make it, or any citizens in the neighborhood weren't able to make it that you thought would want to voice their concerns, next week this will come back and they'll have the opportunity to address council as well. Or, sir, if you wanted to say more next week, you're more than welcome. So just wanted everyone to know sometimes procedurally it can be confusing. Sorry, Mayor.
19's a hearing resolution approving construction documents for the Hamilton Boulevard resurfacing project. I'll move that.
Second.
First public hearing is now open. Anyone want to be heard on this item? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. 20 is a hearing and resolution approving plans and specs for the digestion and high-strength waste receiving improvements project. I'll move that.
Second.
I'm still struggling. The public hearing is open, so I'll use my time for that. I'm still struggling. We've got all these darn engineers out here designing stuff that seem to be out of sequence with what, and I know we're running them by our super engineer, whatever they're, Hazen, but this makes no sense to the average person on the street. That you've hired somebody for $38 million, and this is like the $17 million worth of work that's not included in his contract. What am I missing here?
Yeah, Tom,
I don't know what I'm missing, but that it makes no sense to the average guy.
I had a similar question, Tom, if you could address that, please.
Tom Pinkel, Utilities Director. This project and the UV project were started long before the facility plan. So that's why, if I could redo all this.
Well, who gave this contract out? When did it get given out?
2 years ago. About 2 years ago, this contract was given to Donahue. This is the one where we fired the actual engineer and we hired their sub-consultant. We fired Bartlett and West, took this project on.
How long have you been here?
2 years.
Well, it couldn't have been 2 years ago then, because Bartlett and West was still here for your tenure for quite a little while.
About a month. Yep.
Go ahead, Dan. Are there any more of these out there?
No, nope. There's 3 projects, the UV disinfection project that Black and Beach has, which was started before the facility plan.
Which is completely separate from the facility plan. This was different through the ARPA funds.
Correct, yep. And then this digester project, and then the facility plan project.
Well, that answers it, Tom. Thank you.
3 separate projects. I know it's a lot out there.
Anyone to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. 21 is a hearing and resolution accepting the proposal of Mid-America Energy for an underground electric easement in the combined central Sioux City CBD urban renewal area. I'll move that.
Second.
Anyone to be heard? The hearing is now open. Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. 22 is a hearing and resolution adopting amendment number 1 to the amended and restated combined central Sioux City CBD urban renewal plan. I'll move that.
Second.
Public hearing is now open. Anyone to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. 23 is a resolution approving a development and minimum assessment agreement with Lavi Bay Developments property at 1107, 1109 4th Street. I'll move that.
Second.
Passes 5-0. 24 is a hearing and resolution instituting the proceedings to take additional action for the authorization of a loan and disbursement agreement. I'll move that.
Second.
Public hearing is now open. Anyone to be heard? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. Passes 5-0. 25 is a resolution authorizing an interim loan and disbursement agreement with the Iowa Finance Authority and is securing the payment of the sewer revenue capital loan notes anticipation project note. I'll move that.
Second.
What? I hit it. It was dead. Passes 5-0. 25, or where am I at now? You got me on. 26, resolution approving a purchase agreement for self-storage on 3rd to create an innovation center. I'll move that.
Second.
I know I've asked you a dozen questions, Renee, but when you spend $1 million, it's not something, I still don't understand. If you're going to sell this to this consortium of people, are you selling it to them for $1 and we're putting $1 million in? Because I'm bothered. I've told you from day one, I'm bothered that mysteriously we can find $1 million around here when we don't ever have money, but all of a sudden this project rises to the top that's not in the CIP. You can tell me it is, but this project is not in the CIP. So are we going to sell it to them for $1 million, or are we just, that's going to be our participation?
Renee Billings, Economic Development Manager. So the plan now is that an entity will be created and that entity would purchase the building for the $1 million. We do have a CIP from, I think, 2 years ago that had $400,000 in it for the Innovation Center.
Which was at a different location, and we had discussed it in CIP hearings. But then this property makes more sense for what they were looking to do. And so when it became available, because they were interested before, but then it got sold quickly, and so then they're looking at
We
that.
we can find $1 million today, but we can't find $250,000 to do a playground in Headington. Sorry, I'm old school, and that kind of stuff, just, I'm sorry, but we do these things and because this project is so important to the city. I've been around an incubator before, Alex. Thankfully, it came, I told Renee, I hope it works out like the last one, because I bought it about 50 cents on the dollar, so hopefully this will happen the same way and we can sell it to somebody that'll get a great deal. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it does work. But that's my point, is that this money just came out of nowhere. 400,000, you say we have, okay, where's the other 6? We found it in these different areas, but we couldn't find $250,000 for kids on the west side. That's upsetting to me, so.
Do you want to come up?
Teresa Fitch, Finance Director. Actually, these funds were moved from a different project, another project that was funded by CDBG, by CBD TIF. So it was available for us to move the funding. This project, the project that it was moved from, that project was funded 2 years ago, so it needs to be utilized, or we have to send it back for bonding. Unfortunately, those funds are not available to move to other projects.
I understand all of that. But we had a CIP, now they're saying 2 years ago for 400.
Mm-hmm.
You're spending $1 million.
Correct.
But you found $600,000. Where'd that come from?
It was in a different CIP, the I-29 CIP, that was funded 2 years ago that has not been utilized yet due to the viaduct concerns. So there was $1 million in that CIP that was funded that we can't, we haven't been able to utilize yet due to the work that will be done on the viaduct.
But we'll be putting it back in when we need to. So it's not like it's money that we're never going to spend. It's just we're going to move it to this. It's just the way we do things here that bother me, that nobody talked about where this money that we hadn't spent when we did the CIP. I just think we should be more transparent in how we do things.
I think both Renee and I tried to be transparent within the financial impact. It does indicate that it came from a different project, and it told you what project it came from, and that gives you the ability to determine whether or not you want it to move from that project. If you choose for it not to move from that project, you can certainly stop that at this point, but that's why we put as much information as possible in that portion of it, so you're aware of where the funding did come from.
After I started asking questions, anyway.
But I think maybe I'm in the minority. Renee, you were, I think staff was having meetings with different council members to try to address and answer those questions in the name of transparency of what this would look like or could be. Did you ask those questions and they didn't get answered, or?
No, I asked those questions, trust me.
And it's another CIP that references downtown and opportunity acquisitions, and that's the project we took it from, as this is an opportunity.
Well, this is not an opportunity, well, okay. We'll just vote, that's fine. I'm not going to get into an argument about it.
Well, thank you, ladies. And I guess maybe I'm in the minority. I've seen this work effectively in a number of communities that I've been in, and I think it's probably much needed for a lot of entrepreneurs that can't afford to build out for a lot of our different spaces or different things, and it gives them an opportunity to do so. And there are multiple of them in Omaha and other communities.
Kagan Case is the one that comes to mind. If you ever go to St. Paul, Kagan Case has a similar center, and they have young entrepreneurs and people that do everything from make hot sauce to sell candles to offer cooking classes, use the space. I think it's a huge opportunity. I like that. I'm glad that we're bringing that here.
You guys are missing the point.
The point is, we found the money for this.
It's about being transparent with taxpayers' money. That's what my complaint.
And one concern that I have is it doesn't sound like we're going to have an interest in the building. If there's another entity that's going to complete the purchase, and I was a little fussy about that.
Of just what? About the building itself?
There definitely would be an opportunity to have an interest in the building if that's something council's interested in. I think the other entities would be very open to that. So if that's something you would like to pursue, I will definitely start doing that.
That would be my interest, at least.
Passes 4-1. I vote no. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. 27 is a resolution approving a $60,000 contribution to the Sioux Land Initiative. I'll move that for the sake of discussion.
Second.
Anyone to be heard on this? Did you want to defer that, Alex?
I don't know. I saw that Chris was here. Chris, I don't know if you received my message or not. I know it was kind of later in the day. I just wanted to ask if there was an opportunity for a presentation or if you'd rather us defer it. And again, I know that Mr. Padmore had talked to you about it last week or coming for that, but I didn't know if you wanted to.
Chris McGowan, Siouxland Chamber of Commerce, Siouxland Initiative, 101 Pierce Street. Councilman Waters, I did respond to your text from late this afternoon, and much of the work that we're engaged in, as all of you know, is confidential, not appropriate to be discussed at the podium. We're engaged in several economic development projects and hostings. Just in the last 30 days, we're obviously involved in land acquisition with the city as well. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time that are appropriate to be discussed in this forum.
No, and to be clear too, in the name of transparency, that's why I spoke to the mayor, was just asking if that had ever been done. I understand that some of these things that we work on are more confidential, but I knew there was new restructuring with TSI as far as, is there ever a plan to replace Brad's position, do we think, moving forward, or has that kind of been absorbed, or is there?
I think that you can reasonably expect that position to be posted sooner rather than later. The board of directors made the decision during COVID as economic development activity slowed for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
That's picking back up with the hostings that we're engaged in. The city manager and I had a meeting probably a week and a half ago where we sat down and went through probably a dozen things that we're collaborating on at this time. I'm reasonably optimistic about most of them and hopeful that we'll have good news back at this podium again soon. Some of the things that we can talk about, Councilman, include the tri-state rankings, the Siouxland Metro's performance over the last 3 or 4 years. The last 4 years, we've led our population category in economic development nationally. The last 3 years are the only 3 years that they've ever tabulated per capita economic development rankings. We've led the nation per capita, which is something we're enormously proud of as a tri-state community.
For sure.
This would be our 35th year to support TSI.
Thank
as
you.
a city. From the right up, Mr. Padmore from 1988. And we have partnered well for a lot of projects.
Including the land acquisition that we're in the process of completing right now.
Exactly. And that took a lot of work, a lot of hard work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Chris.
Passes 5-0. 28 is a hearing in consideration of the appeal of Rick and Russ Bertrand and the appeal of Lieber Construction concerning the issuance of a grading permit and stop work order on 5515 and 5628th Street. I'll move that, but I need to ask a question so we know where we're at. Wait, is there a second?
Second.
So this resolution doesn't really say what it's just a hearing. So if we vote yes, we're saying the appeal stays in, we're saying the stop order stays in place, or what are we doing? Because it's not very clear.
Sure. The code, you have the ability to affirm, modify, or overrule the underlying decision, which would be coming from the city engineer.
Right, I understand that, but what are we doing with what I just read?
Sure.
So,
Oh, sure. We left it open today, so the council would have the opportunity to make a decision today, to take it under advisement, discuss as a potential litigation item in closed session, or take it under advisement and come back in a week, 2 weeks, when you decide that you would want to issue a decision.
So this is just a hearing?
Correct.
And we're not doing any Okay, public hearing's now open, go ahead.
You have the option to if you want to rule on the appeal today. And just to be clear, there's two appeals before the council today. The first is the Bertrand's appeal of the issuance of the grading permit. The second is is Lieber's appeal of the stop work order.
Who are we going to hear from?
I'm going to hear from Gordon first.
Yeah, he's pulling up the map.
The Liebers proposed way back when a site development for basically a commercial development, and it was rejected. Right?
Yep, Gordon Ferris, city engineer, yes, that was.
So what looks different today from that grading plan and what's been done?
But the Borrow pit previously was removal of about 1.5 million cubic yards. This one is taking approximately, I think it was 173,000 cubic yards from the Mid-American site, moving it over to the, property.
To their property, yeah.
They took off.
Question is, the answer is, and it doesn't look anywhere near the same.
Right.
Right?
It's the opposite. It's putting dirt back on rather than taking it off.
And then we mysteriously are going to build a building that's 900 square feet, because if it's 1,000, you have to have a floor drain, and according to the building code. And so the next time I buy 50 acres, I'm going to tell you I'm putting a garage on it, which, by the way, on most developments, you can't put a standalone garage. You have to build a house. So what's it zoned?
It's zoned ag.
So you'd be able to put like a shed for equipment or something like that? Or
without a house, because I can't do that in town.
That's a planning and inspections question.
Sure.
Okay.
I figured we'd sort of let each side make their case and
What's that?
go from there. I figured we'd sort of let each side talk.
Yeah, no.
Council has questions
I just
for 'em.
wanted a couple of answers to questions before we start. So. Okay, go ahead.
Russ Bertrand, 1506 Hennepin Street. My name is Russ Bertrand. This is my brother Rick Bertrand. And we are here today as landowners representing what we affectionately call Bertrand Farms. Bertrand Farms consists of about 340 acres inside the city limits, compiled through the years by generations of our ancestors. Portions of Bertrand Farms, purchased by our grandparents in the 1930s, are approaching the century farm mark. The land adjacent to the Lieber parcel is the farm my brother and I grew up on, and we rambled around those hills hunting and exploring and having freedom in ways that I wish all kids today could experience. But to the point at hand, since there seems to be a lot of experts coming to the table, I thought it would be compelled to tell you a little bit more about myself and why I'm uniquely qualified to talk today. I have a degree in construction engineering from Iowa State University, the same as the experts on the other side, with one notable exception. I chose not to pursue my PE license, not because I couldn't. I could sit for it tomorrow. But in my chosen field of expertise, a PE license does me no good and only opens me up to unnecessary liability. Throughout my career, I have had the responsibility of reviewing drawings prepared by others submitted, and I never wanted to be dragged into a lawsuit because somebody might try and tried to simply imply by using my name as a reference on a piece of paper, or the fact that I stamped a shop drawing, that I was a licensed engineer. However, I do have 30 years of experience handling every aspect of construction. I've worked as a laborer, a field engineer, superintendent, project manager, estimator, director of pre-construction, operations manager, and currently as president and CEO of RJ Tide Construction. I've also acted as a land developer. Most recently, I've added a title that I'm most proud of, which is farmer. I've worked on projects in multiple states and jurisdictions. I've had to work through building permits and grading permits in some of the toughest engineering departments in this country. In Arizona, I had to go through land diligence, acquisition, permitting in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, Goodyear, Chandler, Tempe, Cave Creek, and my personal favorite, Flagstaff, Arizona, where I had the legal permits to cut down some old-growth ponderosa pines, and I had to cut them down at night because the tree huggers, a bunch of hippies wearing Birkenstocks, were going to chain themselves to the trees. I've had to analyze rock outcroppings in Springfield, Missouri, Hammer Caliche in southern Arizona, and rock saw through 65 million-year-old Kaibab limestone in northern Arizona. I've scouted a golden eagle's nest in Aurora, Colorado, and had to deal with the Endangered Species Act when the eagle landed 2 weeks before I could abandon that nest. I've gone through the arduous task of water and wetland studies in Fort Dodge, Iowa. I've negotiated through the worst design review committees imaginable, and I've worked in some of the most godforsaken parts in this country in Fargo, North Dakota, and Petula, Texas, if anybody's familiar with those. All of this I go through not to be bragging about my background or experience, but the reality is I've been engaged as an expert in litigation preparation and solicited to be an expert witness. So yes, while this matter is personal to my brother and I do not stand up here as some overly emotional farmer. I'm a guy who's been there, done that, and I can speak as an expert, perhaps not on
Russ,
the details of
I'm
hydrology.
going to need you to wrap it up here.
Well, I could tell you that, Bob, we might be here for a while.
No, we're not going to be here for a while.
We were told we had our chance to say our piece and go through the timeline. Is that true or not?
That's not true. That's not true. Everybody plays by the same rules here.
Well, I got 3 minutes, or do I got the time to present the case as to why this was an illegal
Well,
grading permit?
you need to hurry because we're
Okay.
not going to go there today.
When are we going to go there, Bob?
We're going to make a decision, but you're not going to get an unlimited time here. I said that at the very beginning of the meeting.
Okay. Well, do we want to go through the timeline of events? Would you guys like the handout that I could prepare so you could actually have the facts of the matter?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Absolutely,
then I guess we'll
we
go through
would.
the handout.
We don't have this, do we?
Thank you. Thank you.
So Rick Bertrand and Russ Bertrand, as trustees of the Robert Bertrand Trust, which owns the adjacent parcel and parcels in near proximity to the Sundown Moon-Up development, have filed for a grading permit appeal in accordance with Section 2030-110 of the Sioux City Code and Ordinances. The summary of this appeal is as follows. On 7/7 of 2023, Lieber Construction was granted a grading permit for the above referenced project that was not in accordance with city code. He began grading on 7/7, despite the fact that he still didn't have his IDNR SWIP approved, but as it stands, he started grading. The adjacent landowners did not notice the activity since the work was kept in close proximity to the existing Mid-American site. On 8/2, Lieber submitted an additional grading permit application to amend their 7/7 grading permit. Again, this amendment was approved by the city on 8/14, despite the fact that it was not in conformance with city code. On 8/15, Lieber began mass importing and landfilling within 5 feet of the property lines to the Bertrand property and 2 adjacent property owners. This activity was immediately noticed, and Rick Bertrand met with Gordon Fair and Bob Padmore to discuss how grading operations were taking place, and the permit was issued without notice to the adjacent landowners given the history of the property. Upon review, Mr. Fair and Mr. Padmore established that the grading permit had been improperly issued and issued a formal stop notice to Lieber Construction. Lieber Construction ignored all stop work notices and continued mass importing and landfill of 173,000 cubic yards of dirt on the southwest corner of the property. Lieber Construction agreed to cease operations on 8/29 after they had completed the import of the vast majority of the 173,000 cubic yards on their sediment plan dated 8/11. As landowners of the adjacent properties and the properties in close proximity, we are incurring irreparable harm to our property and ask that the City Council decide that the 7/7 grading permit and corresponding 8/14/23 amended grading permit be found in violation of city ordinance. Additionally, due to the ongoing potential damage, we ask that the 173,000 cubic yards of fill be declared a public nuisance and action be taken to abate this nuisance by the immediate removal of the imported dirt from the site and the property returned to its original condition.
Okay, thank you.
Would you care to have a detailed discussion on why it was an improperly permit, or are you comfortable with the facts and willing to accept it as a fact that was improperly issued?
I'm going to read your whole 12 pages.
That's fine.
And I'm not a lawyer, so they'll have to get that answered. I'm sure this council is going to read it, but I'm going to do that. I do have a question again, they took how much dirt off this site?
266,000 cubic yards for the Mid-American grading.
So they're putting it back on differently?
Yes, to about 2/3 of it.
On a different part.
Are they
of the
putting it on a different section of the ground? That's the question.
Yes,
They're not putting it back where they took it off.
correct.
It's going back on the same parcel, but a different part of it.
Yeah, I'd like to have a map of that sometime or something.
And we have it, because we looked at it in our team meeting. Could,
It's right in the corner, Bob.
I understand, I want to see a picture of it.
and then Russ or Rick, whoever,
So,
sorry, go ahead.
okay, right about, can you see my cursor there?
Mm-hmm.
This is about where they were taking a lot of the dirt here for the Mid-American. I'm not, I don't have the Mid-American grading plan up, but it's about there. This is where they
Okay.
took a lot of it, including some from our property. They did put some of that soil back. They are then putting it down here in this location here.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Rick.
My question for Russ or Rick, it doesn't matter to me, was just you commented on the irreparable harm to your property. If you could just speak to what you feel that is.
Yeah, Rick Bertrand, 1501 PV Street, Sioux City, Iowa. Again, representing the property basically to the south. So it is important, though, give me 3 seconds, Bob, to kind of walk through a quick timeline, though, that Russ is trying to make a point. Is when you go back here, we got to rewind. I don't want to be the I told you so guy, but I stood here with this council and I pleaded a year and a half ago saying, guys, this is what's going to happen when you let a dirt guy that has no intention of developing a piece of property onto a piece of property. This is what you have. I pleaded with this council. Well, here we are. That's okay. So now let's deal with what's in front of us. So you got to rewind. December 14th, we get a notice for a burrow pit because there's a Mid-American site that's going to be developed out here. There's no Mid-American plans in place or anything. We show up. They show they're going to go 25 feet into the ground on top of the aquifer. They're going to take 1.5 million yards of dirt out. Questions were raised at the Board of Adjustments. Board of Adjustments looked at it and said, this is ridiculous. This is not a viable building site. This is not a viable burrow pit. Shut it down. Boom. Denied it. So then they come back, and on January 11th, they came back and they said, well, we're going to answer some of the questions when it comes to the environment and other things that are going on there. So then they get a second bite at the apple with the Board of Adjustments, which is very rare. They come in, present the same information, Board of Adjustment looks at it again, is not satisfied with it, it's a viable site, is not satisfied with the aquifer situation, boom, denies it again. At that same meeting, we came in and I presented a petition from all of the adjacent landowners, basically stressing a year and a half ago saying, quote, a year and a half ago, the environmental impact. We oppose the issuance of an unconditional use permit based upon the unknown environmental impact of the water well system that runs through our property. We are all on well out there. Our cattle are all on well out there. If we were on the water system, it'd be a different story. There's no plans in the future for water out there. We oppose this because we understand, we've been out there for half a century to a century, the neighbors. We understand our water system and the shallowness of it and the uniqueness of the aquifer. So boom, we present this on the 11th. So what happens? So Lieber comes in and comes to the council and says that the Board of Adjustments was being unfair. You guys, which is great, you're all for development, I get it. You send it back to the Board of Adjustments. The third bite at the apple they get at the Board of Adjustments for a burrow pit, shut down. Nope, not gonna do it. We're not gonna put it, it's not a viable site. It's not a viable site. Then they turn around, they say, okay, we gotta shift gears. Then they set a notice out, now we're gonna go for an industrial development. So now they show this, they bring this little boxes, they show on this over the hill behind the city property, and they show that they're gonna put a development back there. Goes to the Board of Adjustments. They look at it and says, there's no feasible water, there's no feasible sewer, you can't even get DOT approval to get an entrance into this thing because it's too close to the bypass. Boom, they shoot it down, denied. They bought a turd, is what they bought. They didn't do their diligence on this piece of property. So then it gets denied there. So now we're getting nervous, guys, as landowners. So we're not just sitting on our hands. We go out and we inquire with Impact 7G. This is a geologist firm. This is Melissa Campbell. Remember Melissa Campbell? Mm-hmm. This is her firm. We go to it and we say, okay, guys, what questions, educate us, what questions should we be asking to educate ourselves to protect our water, our aquifer? They provide us a scope of, what's the word here? Scope of services, saying, guys, if you're going to move forward with this piece of property, this is what needs to happen. So we take this and we're ready to go forward to protect ourselves. What happens? The Mid-American grading permit gets approved. Fantastic. We're all for development. We support Mid-American. We're all there. We look at it. So what happens there? Good for Lieber. They're smart. They're good developers. Like, I'm not knocking that they've weaseled their way through this. They end up piggybacking themselves onto the Mid-American's grading permit. They make the case that we got to have 250 feet onto our property. We've got to now have the city, we've got to sell 83,000 yards of dirt off the city property, which really in the big picture, let's be real, they were really opening up an access to their property is all they're doing here. Oh, we're gonna make sure that we don't have to put or save Mid-American $1 million in a retaining wall and all of this stuff. So again, that's fine. They get on the grading permit through Mid-American. We shut our mouths. They got 200 feet. We don't say a word. We do not file one complaint. We do not call the city one time on dirt, on dust, on weeds, on silt fence, on water trucks, on the concrete. All this stuff that, again, as developers, I'm not here to hold up the Mid-American project. Not complaining. We shut our mouths completely because Mid-American did their diligence. Mid-American went out before the site and they identified the site as an environmental issue. If you look at how the Mid-American draws up their lot, how they bought their property, they identified a federally recognized aquifer that runs through the property all the way through. This is a river underneath. This is the water source that goes through there. They've identified it. So what did Mid-American do? They went through there and they hired engineers. They did test wells. They got reports. They employed Terracon, which is one of the leading engineers out there. And Terracon gave their recommendations. So what does Mid-American do on their site? They put in pillars. They put in wicks. They put in relief valves. They put in things that not only protects the aquifer and their site, but it protects them from liability, is what it does.
Rick, I've given you guys 6 minutes. You got another half a minute.
I get it, Bob, but again, isn't this kind of important?
It's terribly important, but we're not making a decision here today.
But then let's gather the information. This is supposed to be our turn to gather information.
And Rick.
I get it. So I'll speed this thing up. I will. So the bottom line is let's go to this. Let's go. So I start a text message. Dirt starts moving on August 11th. We find out, didn't know it at the time, but a permit was issued on 7/7 for some grading permit outside of the purview for them to move 173,000 yards of dirt. So I go in there and I say, why is the dirt moving? I reach out to Gordon. Why is the dirt moving? He's acting like he does no clue why this dirt is moving. Let me get back to you. I'll find out. So I come back and they're moving dirt on the 15th. We go back. They're still moving dirt. I say, why are they moving dirt? Nobody can explain to me the permit where in the code that they are eligible for a grading permit. Couldn't give it to me. So I show up the next morning down at City Hall. I go into Gordon's office. Mr. Padmore, who has been a champion, Mr. Scott's been a champion, and no offense to you, you've been great. You just got dealt a turd on this. You've got to deal with this. So the problem is that I'm talking to everybody saying, just show me in the code. Bob comes into the meeting, we sit down with Gordon. And finally, Bob just says, Gordon, pull up the code. We read the code 3 times. And we can't identify one bullet point that authorizes them that they should have a grading permit. At that point, we all look at each other and we put a stop order in mind. We go through this process not once, but twice. Lieber had a certified letter sent to him twice to stop. He was on site, told him to stop. Everything but the sheriff. Where's the enforcement? Where's the penalties? Where's the fines? None of this happened. All this time, they had 57 days. They were allowed from July 7th to August 29th to move 150,000+ yards of dirt illegally onto our aquifer. So you ask me, why are we so concerned about this? Because you know what? We've found out, we've educated ourselves for engineers. We've got Jerry Steffen involved and other engineers involved. You know what we found out? Putting dirt on top of an aquifer is really, really bad. And Mid-American knows that. It's in their Terracom report. They identify it by putting weight. Right now they put 3 tons of weight per square foot on our aquifer. What does that mean? It's pushing the water. That could happen in a month. It could happen in 3 years. But they did their diligence. They provided wicks. So they're going to come now post-mortem and beg for forgiveness is what they're going to come up and say. They didn't do any studies. They didn't do any environmental testing. They know they're right downstream from this waterway. They put this on our waterway is what they did. And now they're begging for forgiveness. Because that's what dirt guys do, guys. I've been in this since 1998. This is what dirt guys do. You move it, you beg for forgiveness.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to finish with this. So you think that we're crazy. We're crazy, right? So my mother's up there in the well, our well system right now. On our well, we changed filters twice a year with my dad. Twice a year we'd go down and change filters. I'd help him because he was down to get it going. Twice a year we'd fill these filters out. Right now, we're changing our filters every 3 to 4 weeks, and they're just gray mush. We don't know why. Ironically, we got Barkley sitting out at our well on the next valley, down where we water our cattle with the well system. Our well just went dry 7 days ago. Now we're pulling the pump, and we can't figure out a 63-year-old well why now we can't get water out of our well. Is it them? We don't know. But 7 days later now, we've got a coincidence? So again, we're not crazy here. So what's going to make this right, and the city's exposed, Nicole, and you know that. Steve, in all fairness, is defending his client, which is the city. But they withdrew twice the permit because the permit was issued illegally. You're right. If they issue a permit, they have no liability. But when it's an illegal permit, they've exposed themselves to liability. Gordon would be canned right now, but if you can him, it shows guilt. You talk about sheer incompetence out of this department and the cluster that they've created out here in this corner.
Okay.
And it's being run out of there. So the bottom line is, I'm asking for you guys not only to stop the grading on this, stop the grading. Because eventually what they're going to do here with this basin, they've created a 20-foot high dam, when you look in your packet, a 20-foot high dam by 300 feet long in the corner. They stopped the flow of water. They used a sheep's claw on it, which means they stopped any any seepage that can go through there. They're not growing anything at this point. They've created a dam. They've stopped the water flow. They told the neighbor, if you need water, here's our solution. Get a pump at your expense, and you can pump it over our dam, and you can water your cows if you get dried up. That was their solution with Mr. Kriener. So this idea on his thing that they've got an agreement with Mr. Kriener is just a flat-out lie. So what's going to make this right, and what's going to save the city from exposure on this, because we are looking civil. 100%, Stephen, one thing you are right on this. This is a civil issue at this point. But we need the permit stopped. We need the dirt to stop. We need it to stop. Because we know what needs to happen. You need to abate this nuisance. They have created a public nuisance. You need to abate it and tell them to get the dirt off the site and return it to its original site. I'm asking guys to shut the dirt moving down. This is exactly where we were at 2 years ago. I apologize for my passion. If you were sitting in my position and where we were at, you'd be doing the exact same thing. Thank you.
Rick, the question that I have for you, I guess, is just trying to gain more understanding, is they moved a lot, I'm not going to say a ton because that's a measurable amount. They moved a lot of dirt off of their property and moved it onto Mid-American.
Yeah, for weight.
Sure.
Yeah.
Then what they want to do is move some of that dirt back onto their site.
But not where they took it off. That's the problem.
Correct. No, that's fine. We're not getting.
You got to take a step back. You got to take a step back.
My question though is, so that's what they want to do. But if your wells are already dry and
we don't know,
or you're changing the filter, how often, how much more often, what is their damage that they're like, how would this cause more damage? Obviously there's damage being done somewhere else because they're not in this area.
No, they are in that area. They put the dirt on top of the aquifer. They didn't do the diligence. They didn't prevent the wicks. They didn't do the pressure releases that Mid-American did, that the studies identified.
But I'm just saying because a lot of that ground is off of their property right now.
No.
So wouldn't it be less
the only
pressure?
reason, Alex, the only reason the dirt is going back on the property is because Lieber had the dirt sold and he can't get rid of it now. Mid-American is up their rear end to get it off the property. So they're taking the cheapest and the least path of resistance, which is right across the fence, and they're dumping it. That's all they're doing. They're dumping the property the cheapest way possible. They are in panic mode right now. It's not the city's problem. It's not our problem. And they're putting it in the least path of resistance is what they're doing. So how do you say it hurts? We've learned this. We've educated ourselves. You've got a waterway, an aquifer. It's in your pocket if Russ could have got to it. What you see with weight, what's adjacent to an aquifer, what happens is that water sits on a level of shale. And your pounds per square foot goes out and it pushes the aquifer. It can push it this way, back into you, away, and it can change the route permanently. Truthfully, they'd have been better off to dig the hole when you really look at it. If they would have punctured that thing, it would have done less damage than the weight they put on it right now. So there's liability there. They know that. And they're going to get up and they're going to bring up their engineers and they're going to give us this post-mortem reports about how nothing is damaged, that we're crazy. Are we? We're on a waterway. And they've known it for a year and a half. The local people knew it for a year and a half. The whole time. The whole time.
Okay.
175,000 yards. It's a 20-foot high dam. Look in your packet. Look at the picture of that, of what you have right there. It has stopped the flow of water. Oh, by the way, I've had contact with Dan Paulson, which is the Iowa Conservation Crew. They've been down. That's under investigation right now with the Iowa Department of Conservation. I've got Alan with the Corps of Engineers, the feds now out of Illinois are now investigating this with the waters of the United States because of the timing of this. And also now we're going back to Tom Roos with the Spencer DNR because he was duped. Because if you look at their permit, their original SWIP permit that they put out there, they said they were just going to do a little erosion control. And plus they duped the city because when they showed their plan, they showed a 50-foot setback on the property lines. When that's how they got supposedly their first permit through. Guess where the dirt sits off the property line? The bare minimum, 5 feet off the property line. So when the water does crest this dam, which it will because it's been packed now and it's permeable, when it does crest this, and it will flood the adjacent property with silt. It will create irreparable damage actually on the property, not just the aquifer. This thing was bad from the beginning. It's not our fault. You got a contractor that was betting on the come on a whole lot of dirt to sell, can't get it off the site, and now he's going to dump it on his adjacent property, which is an undevelopable piece of property, which Mid-America has said they will never support to be a borough pit, and I can't ever see the city ever supporting it to be a borough pit. The other thing I can't understand is they also made the promise up here when they were going to leave the city property. Remember that? They were going to leave the city property, Dan, in a better position. You know what they did with the city property? They dumped on it. They didn't need the dirt. It was about a road. So they took all this dirt. There's more dirt on they filled the whole valley from the top of the city property. They stair-stepped it all the way down. They filled the valley. Then they filled the valley at the bottom and put a 25-foot 3-to-1 back to the state property. They dumped the dirt. How did that leave the property more valuable than what it was?
All right, Rick, I asked a question, so I understand. I opened it up, and
I know we're just a couple rubes up here.
Went on a tangent a little bit from my answer, so I appreciate it.
What else? Bob?
All right, give him a chance to talk.
Yeah, love the chance to rebut.
What's that?
Love the chance to rebut.
Who's going to represent Lieber?
John Hines, attorney at Curry Huff, attorneys for Lieber Construction. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for allowing us to be here. And I hope everyone had a chance to review the memo that we had provided last Friday. I'm not going to read that, but I'll highlight just a few points on that. The only topic that's in front of the council today is this matter of the grading permit that was issued on August 14th. I'm not going to talk about permits from a year ago, permits that weren't granted a year ago. Lieber's here about the grading permit that was validly issued. Some concerns were raised. Lieber has worked to address all of the city's concerns and those of the property owners. This really is not a city enforcement issue. The memo goes through a few of the concerns that were raised about potential hazards to the aquifer, to a former well near the property. And Ryan Callahan is here to answer any sort of technical questions you might have about the effect of putting dirt on top of this site and if that affects any of the groundwaters underneath. It's not an area of my expertise. I explained to my first grader how rainwater goes from rain to ground, and that's about the extent of my knowledge. But the grading permit itself, you can see on that document, I don't know if it's probably not part of your council packet, but city staff has it, I'm sure. The purpose of this grading permit was to place fill to repair erosion and improve drainage. That's clearly allowed under the grading ordinance. You start at the purpose of the ordinance. The purpose is the protection and safeguarding of life, health, property, and general welfare. You go to the permit requirement. Has requirements for grading of more than 50 cubic yards of material, requiring a permit. Obviously, this is significantly more than that, so a permit was applied for and granted. I know there's some legal question about the second sentence of that section I was just reading about the approval being concurrent with building permit, land development, or public infrastructure. That doesn't say that no grading permit shall be issued unless one of those three things is happening. I think that's not a consistent reading with the past practice of the city. I think that if the council wanted to say that, they could. Certainly, city attorney's office could draft a new code section that creates all sorts of prohibitions on grading activities. But as the code exists today, the grading permit on August 14th was properly issued. Now, when some of the concerns were raised about does a building permit have to be applied for, Lieber, of course, took steps to make sure it was addressing the city's concerns. And ultimately, when new issues were raised, after that issue was addressed, then a new issue was raised and a new issue was raised. And candidly, I have not seen the document that you were all passed out today, so I'm not sure what's in that and what other claims there might be raised. But again, Lieber's just trying to get back to work. Lieber is trying to satisfy all of the city's concerns. The city's engineer has inspected the site. Our own engineer has inspected the site. Both agree there's no hazards. And so Lieber's ready to move forward. Now, the idling a site like this isn't like parking a couple pieces of equipment and shutting the keys off. You have to prepare the site in a way so that it can be idled so it's not causing damage. And so there was delay in, there was communication between Lieber and city staff about the activities and the concerns, and ultimately that work did stop so that we could come before you.
Let me stop you there, because you were contacted and you said, it's Friday and I don't have time to talk to him, and so I'll try to get with them Monday morning, which is baloney. All you did was stall for 3 more days, which I find very offensive sitting here. The spirit of cooperation that you're now telling us should exist did not exist, and you were part of that chain. And I can get in a lot of trouble for saying that, but the emails bear the facts. That doesn't show that your client and you really wanted to have a spirit. And then you got Mr. Roseboom, who, if you don't send it certified, we're not accepting it, even though it was hand-delivered. Those type of things, for me, don't go over very well. And I got a fuse not quite as short as Rick's, but it's pretty short when people just blatantly do whatever they want to do.
And Mayor, I do understand your frustration, and Stephen Pistolka could confirm I had left him a message that morning telling him I had an appointment that afternoon that could not be rescheduled. And so I apologize for my unavailability that afternoon. And first thing Monday, Mayor, we did get this issue taken care of.
And you needed 2 more days. You didn't stop, you needed 2 more days.
Again, Lieber wanted to make sure it was stopping the work in a responsible way. But so what Lieber's asking for today is very simple. We're asking that the council, you're invited to ask our engineer questions, ask your own, you don't need my permission to ask your own engineer questions, but there's no hazards being created on the property. The grading permit was validly issued, and Lieber would just like the council's permission to resume work and get this project finished.
Why did your client not move the dirt back from whence it came? We wouldn't be here arguing today.
Mayor, I'm happy to let someone from
Well,
Lieber
let's hear from him, because I'm really curious as to why that happened.
Sure.
And here's the problem, is that I don't believe there'll ever be a building built here. I think the only reason you don't take out a permit for a 22 by 33, you're just appeasing the city, and then you have every right to withdraw that building permit once you get all your dirt moved.
And Mayor, I would say on that, I think that issue you've identified of someone applying for a permit in that way supports the conclusion that the code doesn't actually require that permit in the first place.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. I can tell you it absolutely does, because I've had that experience with a church.
We will absolutely build this building. So
Okay.
speculation
You'll
that we
absolutely
won't.
put in driveways like I would be required to, and you'll do everything.
Yes, we are going to put in a driveway, a concrete radius.
Name and
all
address,
about it.
please.
Yeah.
Name and address, please.
Jordan Roseboom, 391 Partridge Circle. We'll absolutely put in a building. DRC went through the review. They requested that we put in a concrete drive off of Outer, a driveway to the building, and we are going to comply with everything that DRC has required us to do. The reason that the dirt did not go back to its original position is a month left, Mid-American changed their grading plan up, and it was at the bottom of a cut. And if it would have been left or returned to that position, it wouldn't have been in code with city ordinances.
But you could have done things differently than what you chose to do. Number one, you could have. Number two, I agree 100% with the Bertrands. You had no place to go with that dirt because Mid-America changed their plans and made you take the parking lot down 2 feet, and you had to get rid of the surcharge, and you had no place to go with it. So this is the solution. We'll just dump the dirt.
We have no timeline on getting that dirt out of there. So to say
that's absolutely not true. They're starting the project right now. That's absolutely not true. I know that's not true.
That is
You've got 2
true.
years to get that dirt out of there?
We have at least a year. They are not going to put any utilities or paving in underneath where the remaining dirt is.
So you've got 2 years, and Hanson, the contractor, will verify that.
I did not say we had 2 years.
A year.
I
You've
said
got a full year.
we have into next year.
You have a full, answer questions. The question is, do you have a full year?
The technical answer is we do not have a date that has to get removed by. There's been informal discussions, but we didn't have a contract date.
You know what, I might just.
And why does that matter, Mayor? I guess help me understand
Because
why
they
has to
don't
be
have a lot of time
beholden
to get that dirt off. I guarantee it, they don't.
And do we have the ability to determine where they're putting dirt on their own property?
Yes.
Yes. We have to file.
We're requiring them, is that? Okay.
Yeah,
We have to
absolutely
file a
do.
bill addendum with an as-built construction after the fact.
And you couldn't wait for this council to meet. You said, if you don't mail us a certified letter, we don't care what you're calling and telling us. We're moving dirt.
No,
Yes, you did.
No, on Friday, we had requested that the city engineering take an official action instead of a verbal enforcement action, which is required in the city code. The
Because
position.
it bought you more days.
Well, it's interesting because it's Rick saying he has to stop because it's according to city code, and Jordan's saying, well, no, you have to take this action according to city code.
Yeah, the enforcement procedures in the city code are very clear on what steps city engineering should have taken. At the initial time that we were told to stop working on, I think it was Wednesday, August.
I remember the date.
Anyway, on Wednesday, we had stopped working at the end of the day at the city's request. And then Thursday, I had spoken with engineering, legal, and manager, and then we were told that this is how everyone has interpreted the code in the past, that you could do grading before a building permit is issued. And we were told to resume work, and then told again on that Friday to stop again. And then that was when we had said, please take an official enforcement action by mailing us a letter. That letter violated our due process, allowed in the enforcement actions by not allowing us a period of time to comply with this new understanding of the rule. And we continued to work until the city told us that there was a hazard being created, at which point we stopped. And the city had asked to do a preliminary determination of these claimed hazards. The city did it, our engineers did it. There's no hazard determined by the city engineers or our engineers.
Can your engineer come up too?
What?
Have your engineer come up too?
Yeah.
You gotta go, yeah. We're not gonna vote on this today, so we'll wait for you. Well, you're abstaining anyway.
Good evening. Ryan Callahan, engineer with Civil Engineers and Constructors, engineer for Lieber Construction. Quick resume on what my background is I too am a graduate of Iowa State University. I also have a master's degree in environmental engineering from Iowa State University. Been a licensed professional engineer for over 20 years. I am chair of the South Dakota Board of Technical Professions, which issues all PE licenses to everybody in South Dakota. I'm also a national officer with the organization that writes the PE exam, and I have written the exam for the last 10 to 12 years. Just by background, in my opinion, there is no hazard here. There is a substantial amount of earthwork that was done immediately to the west of this property. In fact, Mr. Waters, you had alluded to that a minute ago, 10 times the amount of dirt that Lieber is moving on this property was moved on the Mid-American parcel. I heard something about wick drains were installed. Wick drains are installed because of heavy areas of fill. There was substantial fill on that project. The reason they install the wick drains is to speed up consolidation and water removal from the underlying subsurface soils.
There were no wick drains installed on the
okay.
Mid-American
Well, I
project.
didn't know anything about it, but if there were wick drains, that's why it's okay.
Just a minute, go ahead.
And that is filled, by the way, at the corner. That's the definition of fill, when you put it on virgin ground. So I'm trying to figure out where that comes from. That is fill.
Go ahead, Mr. Callahan.
Thank you. A lot of talk about well impacts, aquifer impacts. Understand the concern. Mr. Fair, the engineer for your engineer, and I reached a similar conclusion that we do not feel the added pounds per square foot are going to be negatively affecting this aquifer. That's our opinion. The well issues, every 3 to 4 weeks changing a filter. This project hasn't had the dirt moved for 4 weeks. So I guess I'm not sure how something that wasn't even completed is impacting a contiguous property's well and water system. This area to the west is an industrial development. I mean, there was, I don't think that that's our client's intention here, but there are industrial developments on the westerly property line. In my opinion, the damage that they might be seeing in their well is probably more due to the drought. It's been very dry. I do not think Mid-American caused issues with them, nor do I think this will cause issues with them. That's my opinion. As far as the basin at the southwest corner, that's there for protection as much as anything. It's called a silt basin, so that when water runs off, it doesn't delude contiguous properties. That's why you put them there. Do I expect that to be there permanently? No. That will be something that's likely changed as the future years go down. If the area is developed, there'll be stormwater reports required by Gordon's office. Stuff will be changed, but that basin and its presence there is meant to protect next door, not hurt next door. Questions?
When you bring up the aquifer, is this what's known as the Dakota aquifer? Or it's just the
I'm not
aquifer
sure if it's
in
actually
general?
named that, if
Oh,
it's
okay.
more of a.
And this is,
How deep is your well?
yeah, I was just going to kind of get to that.
How deep is your
because-
well?
That existing one that went dry, but I honestly don't know the answer to that. It's from the corner.
It's not
far?
200 feet.
He said he doesn't know.
Yeah, so
He
it's a
doesn't- he doesn't
shallow
know.
well, it's not a Dakota then.
Shallow wells are typically called alluvial wells. They're
Or
they're
Sandpoint?
kind of a sand point. You can do a sand point in alluvial. You can also do a submersible in an alluvial.
How can all the testing go through, guys? You're a city engineer.
I guess I'm talking to her one day. I'm talking to her, Mr.
Let-
Bertrand.
let- you'll get
Let
your
us
chance to
finish. We
rebut.
gave you time, sir.
You'll get your chance.
So my question is this the same aquifer? We just had a neighbor who drilled a well for irrigation.
Okay.
And it's like 250, 260 feet
No,
below the
that's a
surface.
Dakota.
I would
They've
think
got
they're
a different
probably
type.
shallower than that, but if anything, the deeper.
No, I mean the aquifer that Rick is referring to
I'm
that's
not
going to
sure
get
what I-
damaged.
I'm
Rick,
not
is
sure
that
what-
the same?
I'm not sure what aquifer they're in.
Okay. That's fine. So I just wanted clarity.
The deeper the aquifer, the less likely you will
Correct.
have any impact. However, even with a shallower alluvial type of formation, which
spread
is
out so much.
30 to 100 foot deep max, I don't see how this will hurt that, in my opinion.
We actually identified a federally recognized. Draws it out, recognized by the Corps of Engineers, everything.
Does it say how deep it is to get to it?
Those are alluvial wells, you only go about 70 feet. I'm an old well driller, I know. You drill them with a big bucket bit.
Yeah, I
You go
understand
down
that, but-
70 feet, but what you're talking about is a Dakota, you go down 250 around here.
Right. So we're not talking about that aquifer.
Sorry to interrupt, but for purposes of the hearing, we need
Okay,
to make sure
we're
that everyone is speaking into a microphone.
Right,
or we're-
sorry.
Nope, that's okay. Just anyone that's giving comments, we want to make sure they're in front of a microphone. Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
I don't think we have the answer to that question because we're talking about an aquifer, but we're not able to identify what aquifer we're talking about and how deep it is.
In my opinion, whether it's an alluvial shallower formation or deeper Dakota or Jordan even, which is several thousand feet deep, I do not see how placing fill like this is going to negatively impact it. That's my professional opinion.
All right.
And to your point, I guess, of how it would be showing so quickly or having it just have went there.
I struggle with that.
Wait, you'll get to talk. So are you saying that you didn't tell people, I got to ask this again, that we're not stopping until we receive a certified letter? You saying you didn't say that?
No. Gordon and I had talked on Friday, and I had said that I would like the city to take an enforcement action, and he had said that we were going to get a hand-delivered letter, and I said I would also like it certified.
And you weren't going to stop until you got it?
And then when we received the notice, then that was, our attorneys determined that that violated our due process allowed in the enforcement procedures of the city code.
Did you, I'm just asking a simple question. Did you say you weren't going to stop until you, because that's what Gordon said you said.
I do not remember exactly every verbal conversation that Gordon and I had over this period of time.
How many trucks of dirt moved after the stop order, after the initial stop order? So we're talking Wednesday when initially there was talk about, hey, you guys got to stop work. From that point onward to when you actually did stop, how many trucks of dirt were moved?
I would just like to clarify your point there of when we were told to stop on that Wednesday, we did.
Mm-hmm.
And then we stopped on Thursday. We talked with city staff. They said to resume on Friday, and then we proceeded to continue working. And then we received a letter the following Monday.
We're told Friday afternoon to stop again. Absolutely.
Correct. So, yeah, what Matthew is asking then is from Friday afternoon when you heard the verbal to stop until Monday when you received the letter, he's asking how many trucks of dirt do you think were moved from that point to that point?
From which point to which point?
Friday when you received the verbal from Gordon till Monday when you received the letter.
That would have been just a morning, so a minimal amount. Because that was a Friday, and then the following Monday is when we received the first stop work order.
Correct. Or I understand what you're saying. I think what Matthew's asking is, how many on Friday, the rest of the day, or on the weekend, or in the morning of Monday? Is what he's trying to clarify.
Okay, we're going to give the Bertrands a chance to rebut here and got something else.
A few hundred is as good an estimation as I can.
Few hundred truckloads? We're using trucks or scrapers?
Scrapers. There was no trucks.
So you moved a few hundred scrapers. Well, that's not a minimal amount, my friend.
In terms of the scale that the Mid-American project is.
Of what initially
you know how much
moved,
is in
you
a
mean.
scraper, how many scrapers did you move? And how many yards in a scraper? It's pretty simple.
Several thousand yards.
Yeah, several thousand yards. It
And
wasn't
he's saying
minimal.
compared to the overall project of when they moved all of that onto Mid-American, is I'm guessing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's relative to the project size. It's pretty minimal amount relative to the overall scope.
Yeah, we had the same amount of crew out there.
Sure.
And capacity.
Well, you know what? That's why I was opposed to them doing dirt work at my house, because maybe that's a minimal amount to this guy, but, 500 truckloads a frickin' month or whatever is a lot of dirt to go by your house. So don't say it's minimal when it's not minimal, but go ahead.
Sorry to butt in, Mayor, and I know that the council's very interested and you're very interested in the details of the work. I just wanted to remind the council that the appeal relates to the stop work order and whether a hazard is created.
But we
And
can't
so-
make that decision unless we know what happened.
I understand that, Mayor. And I just wanted to make sure that we're not losing sight of what the question is, which is whether there was a hazard created for a stop work order, and if there's now no hazard, that stop work order should be lifted so that Lieber can resume. Thank you.
And the city in that letter said that they just wanted to do a preliminary determination of those claimed hazards. City engineering did, we had our own engineer do it, and we just asked the city council to let us resume work.
Thank you.
A lot of questions came up there. Again, Rick Bertrand, 1501 PV Street. First of all, they were 3 times defiant on stop work orders. Let me be real clear, 3 times. To answer your question, there's three scrapers for 13 days after the first stop order. Just, we're going to put the dirt on the property. Tens of thousands and thousands of dirts. They talked about that with that in Mr. Callahan's professional opinion that he doesn't see. So him and Gordon were able to determine that this aquifer, this 1,000-year aquifer, is not going to be affected in one afternoon. I would like to see the testing that was done by the city. I would like to see the testing that was done by Mr. Fair. I'd like to see the testing that they did, because Mid-American did their testing. And if you look, if you want, we could provide the Terracom study, and it actually provides and shows what weight does to an aquifer.
I would like that.
You will have that, Bob, in the morning. Another thing, too, so the issue at hand is the grading permit. And this is what really stopped it with Mr. Padmore when we sat in Gordon's office. There's a question that needs to be asked to the developer, to Lieber. It's very, very simple. It's one question and the rebut. Is there any plans for future development on that piece of property? If the question, they've already said it 100 times. If the answer is yes, if it's yes, then there cannot be any dirt moved on that property per of your code. It says specifically in 20.30040, under no circumstance shall a grading permit be issued or shall any grading commence which will have the effect of bringing a subdivision grade unless a preliminary plat has been approved for the said property. So what they're saying is that if you're going to leave this at ag and they're going to put this road in there and they're going to bale hay for the next 60 years on that ag they're fine. They're completely incomplete. But if they have any intentions of doing anything from an industrial park, which they've already shown, or any type of a development on that piece of property, there cannot be a grading permit submitted on that ag piece of property. It needs to be rezoned and redone. And it has to be a plat, just like it has to be done at the north side. So there's your cover to pull the permit, because they're not in code. We sat in Bob's office. We went down the code line by line by line, and it did not meet any of the criteria. And the interesting part is when they did the stop at the end of the day on the 15th, which he didn't know the date, it was the 15th, and then they went back in on the 16th. Ironically, and I'm really looking forward to this FOIA, is we're going to find out who suggested that they put a 20 by 30 pole barn on the property. Because ironically, they came in the next day to complain and to bitch and moan and got to get really upset. And all of a sudden, a solution comes up. Hey, you guys just need to put a pole barn on here, and they can't say nothing. Where did that suggestion come from? Because if that was their intent all along.
I already forwarded that, so go ahead. There's nothing there, but I did myself. So
We'll find out. But I'm just saying is that it's ironic that all of a sudden magically they come up with this 20 by 30 that's under any kind of code. Now they can move around 175,000 yards of dirt. So that's where that came in the next day. They went in to complain, can't understand why the permit was pulled again, why a cease was put into place, and all of a sudden now we're going to build a pole barn to put hay on there. The other thing, too, is you got to remember is I want to keep going back to is the testing is you know what? I'm going to let Russ talk about the testing on this. Go ahead. I know you want to be. I'm going to shut up.
Which testing you want to talk about?
Well, you said you want to talk about.
Oh, I wanted to address, some of this goes to the, I'll be quick, Bob. I appreciate it. The whole point about having to get the dirt off the Mid-American site. As the guy that was one of the 2 or 3 concrete guys that bid that job, I can tell you what their schedule was. The schedule was to get the foundations going. They need to get the surcharge off, period. That concrete guy started on the heels of them getting the dirt off that site, because I sat there watching enviously because I didn't get that job. So I know that's what's going on. I also know that the schedule called out for them to do a substantial portion of the paving this fall, which means them saying that they have a year to get that dirt off the site doesn't hold a lot of water unless Hanson is giving them a really big break to screw their schedule.
Well, the guy that's going to move into that building shaking his head, so I'm assuming you're right, but go ahead.
So I don't know, but I knew that much about the schedule. So with the whole point of we have all this time to get the dirt off. No, they didn't. They had to get it gone. On top of which, now we have all this extra dirt because Mid-American changed their plan. You know what happens when an owner changes their plan and gives it to the contractor and the scope of work changes? You get a change order. So they were given the opportunity, get a change order. They could have charged Mid-American to haul that dirt wherever they wanted because that's the only way they could have done. They had that opportunity.
They probably did, but go ahead.
Bob, and I want,
then they marched it across
and
to
Bob,
put it
I
on
want to
our
show you the
property.
incompetence that was happening out of the engineering department. So when they approved, we find this later, so when it was approved on the 7-7 permit that was approved, we made a specific question and said, did you basically amend the Mid-American SWIP? Did you amend the Mid-American grading permit to get this first initial, this new permit? And Gordon's response was yes. In text message, yes. They basically just amended the Mid-American project. I call Ryan Stansberry over there and I said, hey, do you know that the Lieber boys just amended your grading permit to move dirt onto their site? And he says, no, they didn't. I said, well, I'm just telling you, I got a text message back from Gordon, the engineer, that said they did. Well, then they turn around and Mr. Padmore does his diligence. I call him and he comes back and he says, no. A day later he says, no. Justin just told them it was a standalone permit and that basically that they're applying for their own SWIP. Well, that's the SWIP that showed they were going to do just a little erosion control. So again, who's making the calls there? Is it legal or is it the engineering department issuing the permits? Who do we need to go talk to now to get a permit? Is it legal or is it engineering? Who's issuing the permits? So you talk about a cluster.
Yeah. All right.
And
Well,
one
get us
last
that.
thing.
Get
One last
everybody
thing I
that
wanna bring up, just
Terracon
real quick.
report. But get everybody the Terracon report.
Guys, the picture you see on the wall, that's the grading plan that everybody's supposedly working off of. You see there's about a 50-foot space between our property line, which is the bottom of the page, to where that grading starts. That is the whole point where if that water ever crests that sediment basin, it was supposed to go down the side of that property. What they actually graded is they took that dirt another 20 foot tall all the way to within 5 foot of our property. If that water ever crests,
5, not 50.
not 50.
Got to talk
5.
to them.
So if that water ever crests that sediment basin, the only place that water has to go is onto our property. So they aren't even built to the plan they have shown up there. And quite frankly, if the city engineer went out there to look at it, he should have seen that and said, hey, you didn't actually grade this in compliance with the plan that we supposedly approved. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you.
On the advice of legal, I'm going to propose that no decision be made today, the hearing to remain open and brought back at the next council meeting. And I will move.
And additionally, if the parties wish to submit written statements or any additional documentation, I know the Terracon report was referenced. We'd ask that you provide that, serve the materials on both sides, and make sure they're timely provided to us to serve the council. And then,
What specific
sure.
are you looking for? So we're going to go another week versus us
Terracon
coming in here.
report.
So you want the Terracon, anything specific you want to see from us or from them that we're not wasting your time and rehashing just a very emotional issue? I mean, is there something you want from us?
I would just say if you would like to submit anything in writing or a written summary that you wish for the council to consider, we'll leave that open and allow you to do that, recognizing that anything that's submitted will be shared with all parties. It'll
Okay.
be a public document. And then any additional reports or documentation that you wish to have submitted and be part of the hearing record.
So does the council want to see stuff on the aquifer? Do you want to see stuff on, is this about, or do you just want to know the code? You want to just see that we show the code, that this doesn't meet the code?
I mean, we've got that from
Okay.
we've got
I
a
mean,
memorandum from the
I
attorney.
just don't want to come in here and start barking again for no reason.
Nicole,
You know.
should they provide that to your office?
Yes, I would coordinate through Stephen, as you have been doing in the past, sorry, for purposes of the hearing today, coordinate all efforts through Stephen, and then we'll provide it to the council. and
Like I said before, anything you send to me, I'll send to the council.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I
No,
did the
that's
same
good.
thing for Liebers.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Is
But
there a second to that? Go ahead.
Sorry, but for purposes, just to note that the hearing remains open until all evidence has been submitted by both sides, anything that they wish to submit.
I'll second.
Call the roll.
Shaner.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Waters.
Aye.
O'Kane.
Aye.
Oh, I threw my agenda away. Hang on.
Whoops.
Is that it?
Citizen concerns.
Any citizen concerns, please come forward. Name and address, please.
Hi, Sharon Brown, 2605 41st Street. Just want to thank you, Mayor and council members, for asking the tough questions and for serving our city. Thank you. After listening to all this Lieber Heights development on 41st Street concerns the heck out of me. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Raymond, 27141st. Same concern. After listening to that, I'm shaking, scared. I don't want to be back here in a year and be in Rick's position saying I told you so. Second thing, you're working off, the planning and zoning is working off a 2005 comprehensive plan. There's a 2020 comprehensive plan on the website, draft. Why are we still working on 2005? When's the 2020 going to be activated?
I'm going to let Mr. Padmore explain that to you. I didn't vote for that plan, so I would be a little biased.
The two
so I'll
plans
let
are very
him address
different, that's why I'm asking.
I believe the planning department is finalizing that now for implementation approval by council. So it's in draft format because it hasn't been
It's
formally
been
approved by
draft since
council.
2020.
Been through COVID and other staffing issues, yeah, it's drug on.
So no timeline.
Marty, do you know, is there a timeline for completing it?
We've been working to update it in the last couple of months. Should be this fall. Should be this fall, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. O'Kane.
This week is Celebrando Siouxland, put on by...
It's what?
Celebrando Siouxland, Celebrate Siouxland, put on by Unity in Action. There's going to be tons of events. 6 p.m. on Thursday is the La Torrilla at South Sioux City Library. 8 p.m. on Friday, there's going to be a movie showing at the Jeffrey Dibble Soccer Complex. 11 a.m. Saturday will be a parade and festival starting on Dakota Avenue. So take a trip across the bridge, and that's everything.
Shaner.
I don't have a lot today, other than I want everyone to have confidence that this council will put our heads together. We'll make sure to review all information that's presented to us, and we'll make the most level-headed determination that we can once we've had a chance to review.
Alex.
Yeah,
Mr.
I would.
Waters, I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. Yeah, I was reflecting on the agenda and a lot of things. Staff puts a lot of time into doing a lot of these things and does their due diligence, and I really appreciate that. And I'm thinking that it is pretty exciting, especially the housing development agreement downtown, an additional opportunity for some more apartments. In addition to that, thinking about the Innovation Center, I think that provides a great opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs that are looking at maybe getting a start that would maybe want to open a brick and mortar someday. I think that there's a lot of hope. I think there's a lot of, obviously, enthusiasm on the north side and concerns about north side projects. I understand that people can get passionate, and yeah, and I think the truth is probably somewhere between the lines, but we just got to work through that and make sure that we're making the best decision that we can to continue this development so that we can get more of those accolades that Mr. McGowan was talking about. So looking forward to those discussions. That's all I have. Well, and the last thing I would...
You didn't mention you went to the arts, whatever you call it. I even went this year. What do you call it?
Art Splash?
Yeah. We didn't talk about that last week because we were gone.
That's true. It was impressive. It was.
And I sewed for the fabric going over that. Did you?
No, I didn't, but I did go to Art Flash. It was
I even
really
sewed
nice.
for the fabric.
Dan promised us all a picture.
Kind of an arts sort of guy.
Yeah,
You know that,
exactly.
don't you?
Turning a new leaf. Yeah. Soon you'll be excited for more of those things. Yeah, that'll be the day. No, the only other thing I was going to say was just reflecting on the day of it being September 11th, and just I was watching a documentary last night about things, and it just really got me thinking about the people that serve this community and communities across the country, and just I knew what this meeting was going to turn into, and I was just thinking about how lucky we are to even have the opportunity to have this discussion and dialogue, because a lot of people put themselves in harm's way and don't know whether they'll have these discussions or don't know what their day entails. And we have a lot of people serving this community that don't know what the next day will entail. So just had me reflecting a lot, and sometimes we need to take a step back and understand that while we are going through difficult topics and while there can be disagreements, that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that our egos don't get in the way, that we just try to do what's right for the community and just be, I don't know.
I thought
Honored
the
and
same thing
humbled.
about how everybody came together in this country in 2011, and 4 or 5 years later, we're so divided. It's terribly unfortunate. It's terribly unfortunate.
It's tough to have a conversation nowadays, but
I should have sent Rex an email, but would you get us I think the closing for police officer applying was yesterday or last Friday.
How many applicants?
Yeah, I'd be really interested to know, because that should be a real concern of ours if we continue to struggle in that area, so. I move we adjourn, because I got to be back here
second,
soon.
at 7, I believe, right?
Scott?
7, okay.
Scott?
Aye.
Water?
Aye.
O'Kane?
Aye.
Shaner?
Aye.